This time on Ask Radrat, we're talking about the best way to save money buying a new board. Welcome back to Radrat Video, a channel all about skateboarding where I answer your questions on this series, Ask Radrat. You can go to radratvideo.com and submit your own questions, which is what these guys all did. The first is from Monsoon Josh. He says, I have two possible questions for your video. First question, what are your top 3 unique special pro skater tricks that are probably impossible to do in real life, but are fun to pull off in the games? Finally, can you explain the Somi spin? Looks like a backside impossible with a tail grab. Private Carrera does it in the first Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game. So I'll tackle that one first because that's what it looks like for sure. It just looks like an impossible to tail grab, except it looks like a nollie back foot impossible, like not in the way that it pops, but like the way that it moves. You know, like instead of popping an impossible like this, it looks like she kind of tips her heel and then like just spins it around that way. It's kind of weird. Pro Skater 1 especially had some really weird tricks, like different kinds of hard flips that don't make sense. You know, I've talked about those before. Actually, in my most popular ever video about how Tony Hawk ruined the hard flip, I talk about some of those really weird hard flips that are in those games that aren't really hard flips and confused a lot of people, including me. But that one, it just looks like an impossible tail grab. But for the best special tricks, you said to name 3. I picked out a couple of more. My favorite ever was Mullen's nollie flip underflip in Pro Skater 2. He had it in like 3 and 4 and all that stuff, but in 2 it just looked so good. I don't know why. It just looked really good, especially if you could spin with it. It just always looked good. I always tried to have that special trick. That was one of my favorites. Steve Caballero in Pro Skater 3 had a handstand manual 360 flip. So now that we're getting into stuff that you can't do, as a handstand, I think it just said handstand, but it is a manual too. A handstand manual 360 flip out. Crazy. I remember Daewon Song did a handstand 360 flip back to handstand. It was fake, but like someone was holding his feet off camera. But like 360 flip out of a handstand manual, pretty crazy. Jeff Rowley has a Casper flip 360 flip, which is not what it is. It's a 1.5 flip Casper 360 flip out, but it's all in the air. That one is cool, especially if you spin, because you know, like the board suddenly speeds up if you're spinning the same direction with it. That one was always cool to do. Now I tended to pick the tricks that were quick so that I could throw it and I wouldn't have to worry if I had enough air time, especially since I've done all my my zero stats runs. It's often that I can barely pull off a quick special in the air. So I didn't do a lot of these since you know, when I was a kid, I would pick this kind of stuff though. Officer Dick had Assume the Position 2, is where he pops the board up and he catches it in his butt cheeks as a grab, which is a fun one. For one that I wish I could do, we have Bob Burnquist. This is in Thug 1. He has the levitate grind, where he floats above a grind rail and the board just flips forever using the power of his brain. Bucky Lasek in Thug 1 has the back spin air, which is cool. It's like a McTwist, but halfway through he leans back on the board and he does like an extra spin. So it's like a 900, but then you don't land the same direction as 900. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but it looks like it would be fun if it was possible. And the last one I picked was Gene Simmons in Thug 1, who has a kickflip indie type of trick. It's called Lick It Up. Instead of grabbing indie, he grabs it with his prehensile tongue, which is pretty funny. Like that one I don't think I'd ever seen it before I started to look at lists and try to figure out which ones I would pick. But that one was disgusting, but I enjoyed it. Don't clip that part. All right. The next question is from Jumbo Jim, who says, how much is reasonable to spend on a new setup? If you're looking at getting a completely new setup, what are the pros and cons of buying a complete or buying each part individually? Are there parts of a skateboard that would be smart to buy the cheaper option of? Last time I bought a completely new setup, I opted for almost the cheapest deck I could find at a skate shop I was buying from, as I figured the deck would probably be the first thing to wear out or break. Do you think this tracks, or would I generally save money in the long run buying a more expensive deck from the get-go? So I won't tell you exactly how much to spend because it's going to depend on, you know, where you are in the world and all that type of thing. And then the pros and cons of buying a complete or buying each part individually. If you're trying to save money, buying them all separately, well, you'd have to pay shipping on all that stuff if you're going to find the best deals. Again, that's kind of, here and there. It depends on the exact moment you're trying to do it. But I will give you some tips about the type of stuff to buy. So I've had some problems buying shop decks. So if you go to a skate shop and they have a board with their name on it, I've had nothing but trouble with those. So the first time I bought one, it was at a skate shop, and they had like the pro shop in front, and then you could go inside and skate. I bought a board. It was just a blank, and they had like a stencil or something. And I did a 360 flip, and I landed heel heavy on the nose, and it de-lammed the whole nose, just like tore it apart, like spread out all the plies, just destroyed it almost instantly. I skated maybe 10 minutes. Second time I bought one was from a shop close to here. And the board was fine, but the problem was the graphic was all done with spray paint. Like they just had a stencil and they spray painted it. And it looked fine, but it came off on my shoes. So every time if I landed upside down, flipped the board over, whatever, my shoes were slowly turning red because the graphic was just plain red spray paint. So shop decks, not had the best experience with. Blank decks in general, though, can be pretty good. So I used to go to a site called blankdecks.com. It still exists, but I haven't bought from them in like 15 years. So I'm not going to endorse them. I don't know whether they're still, selling like legitimate boards. But what they used to do is they would get boards that were like from the same shops that pro companies would use, but before the graphics were put on. At least that's what their claim was. And I bought from them many, many times. I would buy a box and I would get like 10 decks. And they'd all be, again, this is a long time ago, they'd be $20 instead of 50. So I would buy like a bulk amount, and I would just have these boards and I can go through them. That was a really good way for me, at least, to save some cash. So blank decks are a pretty solid move, but cheaper boards are not necessarily less expensive, So like the shop boards I bought that broke, or I didn't feel like skating because they would, the graphics would come off and stuff. I would consider some more high-tech boards. So there's carbon fiber boards. One is by Red F Skateboards. Here's one of theirs. That's upside down. And they make boards with carbon fiber plies in it. And I skated one of these for a while. It was like extra thin, extra light, and it kept its pop for a very long time. So if the board costs a bit more, but it lasts a lot more, is it more expensive? I don't think so. A couple more examples are Powell flight decks. Is the Andy Anderson board a flight deck? I'm not sure. Yeah, this is a flight deck. So it's got kind of the same stuff, like some high-tech stuff in it. There's a clip. Yeah, here's a carbon fiber right there on the top ply. There's a video on the Powell Peralta site where they drive over one of them in a car, and it's fine. And someone does a kickflip immediately afterward. So that is an option. And then you've got Lithe, and they use composite on the tips, like all around the outside of the board. So the parts that would normally, wear down the fastest are more enforced. So those boards are the most expensive out of all these. But I think they last a very long time. I've yet to try one. I'm not endorsing this stuff. At least the ones I haven't tried. But so yeah, like if you spend a lot more on a board, but it lasts a long time, that might end up being cheaper in the long run, especially compared to shop deck that breaks in 10 minutes. Let's talk about some other parts though. Bearings. You can go pretty cheap on those and be fine. Unless you're doing, vert, or you're skating on ramps a lot. And it'd be obvious you got to pump way harder to try to get up to the coping. If you're just skating around, doing some street, doing some kick flips on flat, getting pretty cheap stuff, not so bad for those. And again, maybe getting super high-end expensive and, pulling them apart and re-lubing them all the time would last even longer. I don't have a great way to test that. I've thought about it, but I'm not sure how I would test that. So, that may or may not be a big deal. Cheap grip tape is fine. As you skate more and more, you'll get some preference, if you like it super grippy grip, but you can get plain black. It works just as good as the camo or all the other stuff they have at the skate shop. Cheaper trucks. So trucks, to me, it always seems like people have a preference, but it's not that one truck brand is good and this different one is bad. you know, this one is higher and it turns a lot sharper. This one feels like, you know, the kingpin's super low, so you can lock into different grinds better. Like, they all seem to have pros and cons. So you can go for, you know, the truck that's on sale right now, get the plain one with no printing on it or anything like that. I think you would do just fine. Things get tougher when you have a strong preference, but if you're just buying some trucks, I think it'd be fine. And something else I noticed when I was on that site, I was checking out the current version of blankdex.com. They have a truck that they say is from the same mold as the Independence, which I'm a little bit skeptical of, but if you want to try it, those are available there. And one of the other things I could think of is shoes. Not a great way to save money. Like, you don't want to buy non-skate shoes. You'll tear through them pretty quick. But my move, and I did this a while back. It was on Black Friday. I bought like 10 pairs of shoes, really cheap. And I have my closet, I have like a shoe rack in my closet. It's just full of shoes. As soon as the current ones go, I got another pair on deck. And I have them all for Black Friday prices because I bought a bunch of them. So those will be my tips to save some money on skateboards without buying like a cheap one that is going to fall apart on you. If you have tips, put those in the comments. Hopefully that can help some people too. But that is it for that. If you have questions of your own, go to radratvideo.com and submit them on the homepage. And I will see you next time. Thanks for hanging out.